Oh my god, this is a prompt I was never imagining I would ever see. Of all things, Until Dawn is getting a movie adaptation. And I mean, I guess if I think about it long enough, that does make sense, but I'm just absolutely shocked by this kind of news. Now, this was announced just last week and is part of Sony's current directive to put all sorts of IPs that they own into the movie industry or the TV series. And sure, you can bring up all the same old talking points when it comes to video game movies and TV shows, like, is it not just superior to consume the story through an interactive medium rather than an interactive medium? That's not the word. Whatever. To which I say, I don't really mind. Is it better to play The Last of Us to enjoy all of that character development? Or is it just as nice to watch Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey playing the role on the screen for us to see? Honestly, I don't mind it. I just like getting some really good stories out there. And Until Dawn, this is my favorite horror story. I think part of the reason I do enjoy it so much is that this is like 5 to 10 hours long, in a sense. The horror world and the story that gets told is so much more immersive as well because of the gameplay, but also just more broad and open, you know? You have the mystery of a killer, you have a fiery guy, you have a monster, you have the mines and a bunch of lore and some history, and a big cast that each explore different elements of this giant puzzle piece. That being said, even if they do choose to condense it down into just 2 hours, I'm actually really hyped for this. It's no secret that video game adaptations are getting better and better as the movie industry seems to be getting a better grasp on how to do things well. The Sonic movie franchise is going well, the Mario movie went very nicely, The Last of Us is a success, and there are all sorts of other video game adaptations coming out. I was actually just wrote a list for potential future prompts I was going to talk about in the year. There's loads, like there's a Pac-Man movie, you will probably know Iron Lung, Space Channel 5, Stray, Poppy Playtime, Space Invaders, Borderlands, Ghost of Tsushima, Cyberpunk again, It Takes Two, Grounded, there's loads to cover. But this is clearly part of the Sony directive, it's got a little bit more of a history to it, it's more likely to be a little bit better directed. Not just a pop-off idea that might do well, but is a bit of a stab in the dark, you know? That being said, with the actual prompt of Until Dawn, there are some interesting things that could go hand in hand with it. I mean, after all, you look at the visuals on top of this video and you can see it's already a fully cinematic experience. The act of doing this again in a proper live-action format's not gonna be too difficult since the animation for this was likely all mocapped already. It is just The Last of Us again, with a little bit of a flair on the side, you know? Making some good set designs and a really good designed monster with some good prosthetics. And on top of that, you've kind of already got your cast as well. Whilst, as I understand it, no cast has been officially confirmed, it's no secret that this would be a very easy adaptation if they literally just ping all of the cast again. I mean, I'm sure they already have been pinged, to be honest. If not, they have been now that it's gone public. The big seller back in the Until Dawn days was, of course, Rami Malek, playing the titular character of Josh. Perhaps he would be the hardest cast member to bring back since he's obviously made some massive successes since then, and even before that, I knew him from Night at the Museum. But also, this is the Sony bag we're talking about. They've absolutely got the funds to bring him back. So for those that are unaware, and I'm not going to go into full-on spoilers for this, just for those that don't know the story and would actually like to experience it for the first time, the plot all takes place in this sort of mansion estate off in some icy mountains. A year ago, 2 members of this gigantic teenage group fell to their deaths and were never found. 1 year later, they all do one big reunion to sort of hang out and party, do your classic sort of teenagery things with your classic tensions and dramas. All the while, there are creepy things going on in the mansion. They never turn on the lights for some reason. There's an abandoned cave down in the Beneathlands, and with a handful of mysteries in all sorts of directions, there's also a monster on the loose outside. Everyone's disbanded, mixing and crossing paths here and there, and depending on how you play the game, you decide if and when each of the characters die. You can do a version of the playthrough where everybody lives, other than the 2 girls at the start really, and you can go to an ending where everybody dies. One of those classic choice-based games. And surely for the movie version, it'll probably be everybody lives. Well, I guess no, horror movies don't like doing that. We'll see. Anyway, what are the actual production details behind this movie, other than the fact that it's a Sony thing? Well, set to be film director is none other than the Shazam guy, David F. Sandberg. Now, alongside doing some other productions like Lights Out in 2016 and Annabelle Creation in 2017, he also has a little bit of a negative to him because he also did the sequel to Shazam, Shazam Fury of the Gods. But the way a lot of hardcore niche movie YouTube fanatics would know him as Pony Smasher, as this director actually has his own YouTube channel with over 300,000 subscribers giving all sorts of little video essays and behind the scenes information about stuff, including doing a full scene breakdown of Shazam and how they fixed a certain hurdle, giving a bunch of crew members fake props in order to make them fit with the scene when they weren't supposed to be visible. Now, some other companies are involved beyond just Sony. It's part of PlayStation Productions, sure. But another specific label to this is Screen Gems, who are also part of Sony Pictures Entertainment. They're still kind of under the Sony wing, but it's worth noting. And then, of course, you've got the company behind Until Dawn, Supermassive. Probably goes without saying that they are involved. But in case you're not aware of Supermassive games, I'm incredibly 50-50 on them. I absolutely bloody love Until Dawn. That was their first real game going into horror, mastering the storyline, splitting everybody up, and giving this great mystery that unveils, right? They then bring out the Dark Pictures Anthology series. This is a bunch of separate horror games that are just sort of like middling, mild, small pocket versions of Until Dawn, and I bloody hate almost all of them. These games come out buggy, almost unplayable, especially day one. If you try to play any of these games co-op, it's an absolute embarrassment, and even when they've gotten slowly better over the years, the latest one gets to the point where YouTube literally has a compilation of big YouTubers playing their games and laughing at the stupidity of one of the gags that's actually meant to be like a serious death or something.
They are on. We need to outthink him. We need to be smart. Immediately.
Beyond just the lack of functionality, the stories here are terrible. With Supermassive basing these horror games based out of choices, the choices in these stories are horrendous, unfulfilling, and then the reveal of whatever the plot is terrible as well. Take Man of Medan, for example. It's all on boats, it's about some sort of horrifying imagery hallucinations everybody's having. I'll give you the spoiler right now. The twist is that everyone's huffing hallucinogenic gas, right? You can make that prediction during just the prologue, because of the way that one of the characters kills one of the other characters thinking they were the monster. Oh, that's the entire plot. 3 hours later, wow, what a surprise, that's the plot. Interestingly, in concept, how you have co-op modes where the players are accidentally trying to kill each other, cool. The story mystery was lost in it. But the worst thing about Man of Medan is the fact that you play several characters, as usual, right? One of the characters has a quick microsecond quick time event very early on when they're being raided by pirates, whereby if you don't catch this 1 second window, you are instantly shot dead 15 minutes into the game. Unresponsive for the whole rest of the plot, right? However, if you make it, if you do successfully dodge this bullet that goes flying out at you, this character then drives the boat away and becomes unresponsive for the rest of the game, untouching the entire plot, coming back only at the very, very end. It's a waste. It's stupid. It's so poorly done. And it just removes a character, like, it's so bad. But it could be worse. It could always be. Welcome to the halfway mark. How are you feeling about this movie so far? Let me know in the comments down below, or give us suggestions on our Discord. But otherwise, if you'd like to see more movie news, I've got a million gaming movie prompts to apparently talk about now, so I will do. Come subscribe if you want to see us talk about other stuff. Poke at me which one you'd like me to cover next. Sony alone are doing like Horizon Zero Dawn, as well as Ghost of Tsushima, as well as God of War. It's all sorts. Anyway, let's get back to Until Dawn. I could legitimately ramble about this for 2 hours. Let me know if you want to see that, because I could. But it could be worse. It could always be Little Hope. This was one of those games that was actually unfunctional when I watched some people play it. I'm pretty squeamish about horror, so I never actually bought these games. I'd love to have done in hindsight. I actually really enjoyed them. They're not too scary. But this one, this one's like got a group of people. They're each getting haunted by like a specific monster that's also a clone of themselves. That's kind of interesting. But the team never really splits up. They never really unveil the mystery more. They just keep walking in the middle of these like foggy roads until their monster comes and almost kills them, and maybe does, but probably doesn't. And then the reveal at the end, after everything practically broke down on the playthrough I was watching, and they literally couldn't access the final scene of the game, it's revealed that it was all a dream. Literally, none of the characters existed. It was just the bus driver hallucinating, pretending to be all of them or something. Oh, it was bad. I'm infuriated about it. House of Ashes, I've heard, is actually pretty good. At this point, I was practically boycotting the company because of how immorally produced them games were and how poor the storyline was. really making Until Dawn seem like a lightning in a bottle that'll never happen again. But I've heard people enjoyed it. Sure. Then they bring out The Quarry. The Quarry is not as good as Until Dawn, but you know, I'll take what I can get and watch someone else anyway. No longer is it Rami Malek involved or Ashley Tisdale, it's Brenda Song. Very nice. This as well had a very interesting storyline. There's a whole bunch of teenagers, they're at a campsite, they split about, you know, they proper explore this mystery. There's a great element of choice development here, where each of the characters can in some form be, let's say, corrupted. And depending on which characters are corrupted in the plotline, changes all sorts of different pathings as they're constantly crossing paths. So obviously if someone crosses paths with a corrupted character, stuff happens. Great, not perfect. There's a lot of things I got concerns about, but whatever. And then finally you have The Devil in Me, which just goes right back to Man of Medan style. The plotline, at least, is better. Kind of weird that they based their serial killer off of a copycat of a real serial killer, that they also repeat the real killings of what he did at one point. And then also the plot just diverges into making zero sense, and like the choices don't make sense. You can save one character with a screwdriver, but if you give it to a different character in the exact same scenario, it doesn't save them. It's stupid. But with Until Dawn, I'm very happy with it. Supermassive Games are of course going to be involved in this. Great, you know, they get them involved. Do it well enough, give us Quarry, it'll be fun. But this isn't just a pitch that's been shoved out there to get attention, the script is already very much underway. The original script for Until Dawn was written by Blair Butler back in the old years of 2015 and probably 14 and 13, judging by gaming development. But is now being revised by Gary Doberman, who is specifically known for writing some pretty notable horrors like Annabelle Come Home, It 1 from 2017, The Nun, and The Nun 2. It's legitimately a proper horror film writer coming in to make tweaks to a pretty massive horror story that I think could go really well. In fact, I was just skimming their IMDb. They actually did It Chapter 2 as well, and all 3 Annabelle movies, like all sorts, really. All of them. Really, it sounds like what the difference is going to be the element of adding proper tension. I doubt they're really going to readapt, like, the lore of what's going on with the mines and the miners. Maybe they'll have more proper sequences and flashbacks to showcase them, but really it's going to be just making the characters have more dramatic moments, really building up the scene for the big screen. And Screen Gems, as the representative talking to the media over this prompt, has also come on to say that this adaptation is going to be an R-rated love letter to the horror genre. Oh yes, we're going proper R-rated horror. That does low-key terrify me, but I can probably take it considering I know the story. There is a version of the timeline where heads come off, and when it comes to their spiritual successor, The Quarry, hands disappear as well. So, like, it lines up, really. Now, as much as I've been super surprised by this actually becoming a thing, I guess it really shouldn't be a surprise. Not only was this game pretty well received when it came out, I've got all the praises for it certainly, even though I consumed it years and years later, but apparently the Until Dawn sales for that original game back in 2015 exceeded all expectations and was nominated for multi-end-of-the-year awards. Plus, on the PlayStation Productions front, it's nice to have a proper horror genre in there, on top of just general drama and action. Plus, it works as a great love letter to all of horror as a genre as well, as there's all sorts of references to all sorts of styles involved. Beyond the monster and the serial killer and the lore and the horrendous deaths, you've even got death traps from Saw that was given a cheeky little scene. You got some spiritual elements with totems that give you flash forwards of potential timelines. I wonder how that'll be adapted, actually. That'll be very interesting. They're probably not going to do much with that, but I mean, that was a great mechanic, at least for gameplay. And I like the idea of when horror films get more spiritual and funky and larger than life. Who knows? Not to mention the characters themselves were different little archetypes that they could play around with. You got the jock, you got the overly sexual girl, the nerd, the shy one, you know, it's all there. Whilst at the same time, it balances a very nice vibe of being cheesy and cliched with actually acknowledging the fact that, you know, horror tropes happen and then trying to subvert them in their own little ways. With all sorts of dialogue referring to other sort of horror movies and where you would expect the general idea to go, said by the characters themselves to sort of ease the air and not make it feel like every character's an idiot that's never seen a horror plot before. Really, the biggest hurdle that comes away from this is the very fact that the original story and the original game has that butterfly effect branching timelines, which will likely be lost in this movie, unless of course they do like a cheeky thing of, hey, here's 3 different tickets, they have different plot lines. I doubt it. It'll be a great way to triple your profits for like 1/3 more movie, but you know, it's an interesting prompt to imagine what timeline they'll actually go with, because if everybody lives, it's kind of an unsatisfying horror movie in that way. You're not really using the R-rated element at all, you know? And I'd be curious to see which shots remain exactly the same as the original and which they choose to spice up in a lot of ways. You know, what moments get kept in and what can be lost to the side. Now, some marketing quotes we got from the head of product for PlayStation Studios, Asad Quizilbash, said, "As our partnership with Sony Pictures continues to grow, we're thrilled to be working on our first movie with screen gems. Until Dawn is a fan-favorite PlayStation game that we can't wait to bring to the big screen." Classic, right? And to be fair, even if this movie turns out to be a little bit of a flop, I'm personally not gonna be too disappointed on it, because I'm just kind of the stance that I just like the story to get out there to a wider audience. If you see this and think, it's not that good, might as well just play the game for the proper experience, that's a win-win as far as I'm concerned. After all, the Sony adaptation trend hasn't been all too perfect. I've referenced The Last of Us in the past, but we've also had things like the Uncharted movie, which was about, you know, as influential as you can expect. Meanwhile, there was the Gran Turismo movie. I watched that on the plane a couple days ago. But with it going into a new genre of horror with a proper horror insider involved, it can probably go in the right direction. Just to see how things go with the other things they're working on, like God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn and Ghost of Tsushima. Ah, dear. But what do you think of this news? Do you have any interest at all in this kind of game and movie and its adaptation going on? Do you think it will actually improve the product by ironing out some wrinkles in the plotline, or do you think it will just make a far inferior product, choosing to remove deep character development between characters in favor of putting Sam in a semi-nude scene again? I guess we'll just have to see what direction they choose to take. And if it does really well, will they make a sequel? Well, who knows? I, at the very least, am incredibly optimistic. I love this game, and I only wish it the best. So, I'll end it off there. My name's been Daz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a little bit.